Hi, my name is Stephen Page. I'm the worship minister here at Trinity United Methodist in Paducah, Kentucky. We're glad that you're doing this leadership training with us for a church to function at its best, to serve its community and to grow disciples. It's important that all the leaders have the same mindset, have the same page and awareness of what we're trying to do and how that the church is structured and organized. In Luke, Christ says, "But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. For who is greater, one who reclines at the table or one who serves?" So us, as trying to grow ourselves as leaders, we're also trying to grow ourselves as servants. And we hope this training will enable you to do that, to enable God's work to be done even more fully through this church.
Greetings. I'm here this afternoon to share with you a segment about our team building here at Trinity. We're going to be talking to you about the 3L process, and it's loving, learning, and leading. And I'm going to be talking to you about the loving part of our work together. First of all, when we talk about this, we really are talking about a working relationship between all three. They do not stand alone, but they're interconnected, and what one group does, it fits into what the other group does, and it brings us to a wholeness of ministry that will be helpful to us for our future. First, we look at loving. Now, there are three aspects to loving that we're going to be looking at, and it's worship, glory sightings, and spiritual formation. First, we begin with worship. Worship, we all know what worship is, but have you ever thought about worship being a road where you're searching for where you need to be going or want to be going? There's choices that have to be made. And what we want to be is on the road that leads to God and God's will and plan for the work that we will be doing together in ministry. We don't know what that road is. We strive to find out. We love one another in that process, and we hear from each other as we find the way down the proper road of ministry for us here at Trinity. Identity is a part of worship. Who we are, who God is. Identity is not a status to achieve, but it is a gift to receive. We don't have to work for our identity. We are one of God's children. We are a child of God. We are a person of worth. As we think about this idea of worship in our working, everything that we do when we come together is an offering to God. As we work together as a team, we take our individuality and we offer that to God as a form of our worship. We receive a lot from God. We've received discernment, we receive pathways, but it's all done in a loving experience. And worship is a big part of that. Secondly, we have what we call glory sightings. Do you realize that the word glory appears 250 times in the Old and the New Testament? The glory that you have been given me, said Jesus, I have given to them. Well, we know the glory that God has placed upon His Son, Jesus Christ. And do you realize that Christ has offered that same glory to us? The whole idea is there for us to all be one together. One with God, one with Christ, one in the Spirit. We are glory to God. John Wesley said, we have no design but to promote the glory of God. That slide that you have before you, you'd say, that is a beautiful setting. It tells us about the glory of God. But do you realize that you too are part of that glory? You offer glory to God, and When people look upon you and the work that you do, it is a glorification of God. It is a glorification to the ministry that God is calling each of us to. Finally, there's formation, spiritual formation. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, it says, "And all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit." Our image is transformed. Our ministry is transformed by God. And we offer ourselves in ministry to God in order that transformation might be able to take place. Spiritual formation is the process of being conformed to the image of Christ. Not only are we conformed to Christ and try to be like Him, we are also a servant to others. We're a servant for the sake of God's mission, for the sake of what God intends for us to be about here at Trinity, for us to be servants of God, but also servants of others. We ask ourselves the question, what actions do I intend to take to grow deeper into the likeness of Jesus Christ? That's spiritual formation. What do we intend to do in our lives so that we might be more like Christ? If you're like me, you say to yourself, well, that's a big undertaking. Indeed it is. But isn't that what God is calling us to do? To be like His Son, Jesus Christ? Isn't He calling us to share the likeness of the kingdom to everyone that we come in contact with in order that we can be in ministry to each other? I guess to sum up what loving sort of means to our process, it would be love God, love others, love yourself.
Hello. Next we're going to talk about the learning process of the three loving, learning, and leading. And during this process we'll talk about a covenant, building a covenant, and building the team or the community. So starting off with building a covenant. The covenant is God's idea. It's not ours. It's a way to balance our commitment to faithful, disciplined obedience with God's amazing grace. Basically, it's the glue that holds the team together. A covenant defines how we're going to work as a team, I guess is the best way to put this. So one of the things we have to do is to build a covenant, and the covenant building process is really 4 functions, and I'm going to talk about the third and the fourth in this little presentation, which is what should be non-negotiable for this team. Depending on the team makeup, there are going to be some non-negotiable items, such as presence. It's hard to be part of a team if you're not there. There'll be also some things like support and things like that. But that is a negotiation process within the team. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Using those non-negotiables, then we take those non-negotiables and build those into what we'll call a covenant. And that's just basically a list of rules, for lack of a better word, that we're going to live by in the team. So the covenant checklist that we would look at about, again, as I previously mentioned, attendance, preparation. Come to the team meeting prepared, or to the task. If you've got a team of carpenters, you come prepared with tools, or maybe one person is responsible for the tool. But anyway, the preparation Everybody should come prepared to work. Confidentiality, that could be part of the most important part of a covenant. Teams have to work, and sometimes confidentiality has to come into play. And it has to be understood that that is a requirement of the team. And part of that would be defining whom to share even during the team meetings. This is not confidential. This has to remain confidential, and making sure that everybody understands. Prayer. We're a faith-based organization, and these teams are spiritual-led teams, so prayer is an important part of that. How often, for what reason, and for whom? Those are all part of the covenant checklist that a team should go through to reach its covenant. Next, we'll talk about accountability. There is no covenant without accountability. But then you ask the next question, what happens if we breach the covenant? This is not a punishment issue. This is holding each other accountable. If someone breaks the covenant, then it's more of asking the participant, what happened? Why weren't you there? Why didn't anybody know that you weren't going to be there? Not you've done something bad, but it is letting everybody know that the covenant is important, and we're going to abide by it and understand it. So we don't want a covenant to be a punishment tool. We want it to be an accountability tool. All right, next we're going to talk about defining the team. Spiritual teams are different than other teams that you may be a part of. We define teams as the best of both worlds coming together. People who live deeply with one another in the pursuit of Christ and in pursuit of a common mission or purpose. Teams have lots of missions and purpose. Some are technical in nature, some are legislative in purpose, and some are operational. Those should have a different, but they all have a purpose. If we didn't have a purpose, there wouldn't be any need for a team. Next, we'll talk about the participants in the team. A participant is expected to share in the responsibility and ownership of the results. Just as in a team sport, there's only one score for the team. They succeed or fail on that score. The team succeeds or the team fails together. And that's important to team formation. Every participant needs to understand that they are part of that team and therefore part of the success of that team. All right, and then last thing we're going to talk about is the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And those are, and these have been proven many times, whether in a faith-based or spiritual team or in a outside the church team. If you're not paying attention to results, then things are not going to be done correctly. Avoidance of accountability. We talked about the accountability and the fact that the team succeeds or fails together. Lack of a commitment. Everybody needs to be committed to the mission or the purpose. Fear of conflict. Conflict is not necessarily everybody agreeing. I mean, lack of conflict is not everybody agreeing. Conflict is sometimes very healthy to a team. There are different opinions on how to do certain things, but once the decision is made, then the decision is made. But being willing to enter into those discussions is very important for team health. And part of that is another dysfunction is an absence of trust. You have to trust somebody to be part of a team. We'll have each other's back, and the team members need to understand that. And those are the things that we wanted to talk about in the learning process.
Greetings. You've heard Stan talk to you about loving, and Steve talked to you about learning, and I got to talk to you about leading. At Trinity, when we talk about leadership, we are always talking about spiritual leadership. As our triangle illustrates, we often have great leadership skills. The world teaches us that, how to be a great banker, how to be a great mechanic or how to be a great teacher. Those are important. We don't want people to lead poorly, but in the church, our leadership must be not only well developed in leadership skills, but strong disciples of Jesus Christ. The combination of strong leadership gifts, strong spiritual formation leads to a strong spiritual leader. And a strong spiritual leader leads to what we call generative ministry. Generative ministry is organic, energetic, changing and evolving, always making room for new people. It is where spiritual leaders, you see the importance of that terminology, makes more spiritual leaders. Out of the interaction we have with one another and how that relating to one another, we come together in order to allow each other to use our gifts and our talents and our graces to make room for people who are different from us, and out of that often decide we need a new leadership team to reach a new need or a new opportunity God is creating for us. Those generative ministries are able to overcome adaptive challenges. And an adaptive challenge is a challenge unlike a technical one where there may not be a known solution. We may have to try different things. We may have to fail a little bit in order to figure out where it is that God is leading us. Remember Stan and the road? God is always leading us somewhere, and it takes that spiritual formation that helps us discern that process. It's an adaptive challenge that God calls us to. That building team, spiritual leadership team, as Stan already talked about, talks about loving, learning, and leading combined together in a covenant. That covenant relationship is spiritual leader to spiritual leader, creating a healthy and safety environment for generative ministry to happen. How we do that together matters. Steve showed you this slide just a few minutes ago on the importance of building a covenant. And he helped you, I hope, understand that a covenant is simply an agreement we enter into together that binds how we will do our job and interact with each other. It's God's plan. It's God's idea. It's God who entered us into this covenantal relationship. In our leading, it should be with our covenant clearly in our mind, taking everything we have learned and remembering that we have love for God, love for each other, and Stan pointed out even love for ourselves, and that forms and shapes every step of our leadership. We desire Trinity to be a healthy, generative church where there is room for everyone, and we lead as spiritual leaders for the transformation of the world, one disciple at a time. Thanks for joining us in this transformative process.